When we think about our health, we don't generally think about our skin, do we? And yet our skin is the organ that's most exposed to the external environment. So what happens when our first line of defense against the outside world is weakened? Hi, I'm Germaine Tan, and this is On The Pulse. In today's episode, we take a closer look at the most common skin disorder in Singapore, an invention that can tackle that itch, and all you need to know about SPF. I have friends who suffer from atopic dermatitis, better known as eczema, and it's definitely more than just a rash. I've seen how it can affect their daily lives, from disrupted sleep to the difficulties in doing daily activities such as exercise, and it's a condition that affects a lot of people here. In Singapore, about 1 in 5 children and 1 in 10 adults suffer from eczema. It's an inflammatory skin condition that causes itchiness, rashes, dry, scaly patches, blisters, and skin infections. There are different types of eczema, but the most common one in Singapore is atopic dermatitis. Professor Stephen Teng has been working with eczema patients for over 20 years.
Well, the causes of eczema is quite complex, but we can summarize it in 2 main areas. So the main factor would be the skin barrier. Your skin do not produce enough of the protective oil glands that protect them against the environment, allergens, and house dust mite. The second problem would be the immune system. Eczema patients has got hyperactive immune system, such that when the skin gets irritated, the immune system responds maybe 5 times more than normal people. And because they've got hyperactive immune system, that's why the skin gets irritated, red, and itchy.
So why is eczema so common here in Singapore?
Well, nobody really knows. There's many reasons for it. One is, of course, the urbanization with pollution, which irritates the skin. Then in Singapore, because it's hot and humid, we have got a high population of house dust mites, and it's well known that house dust mite allergens irritate the skin. In fact, if you were to do an allergy test on eczema patients, I would say that almost 90% of them would develop allergy to house dust mite.
What?
Which is rampant all across Singapore.
So I've seen how eczema can affect the daily lives of sufferers. How bad can it get?
Imagine a patient coming to you with all his body surface area covered with red, itchy, whippy rashes. Patient describes that they would scratch incessantly at night. They wake up the next morning, find their bed sheets full of blood and skin fragments, and it's very traumatizing to patients. And because of the very bad experience they have at night, they can't concentrate on work, or they get frequent infections and they go on medical leaves quite often.
What are some best practices that you would recommend for a patient who is seeking treatment for eczema?
Well, I think the most important consideration patient must have would be to stick with their doctor or their dermatologist. It takes a long time to treat eczema. The cause of eczema is complex, and the immune system of each patient is different. So different patient responds to different type of treatment. So generally, the doctors will start with the most common and see how the patient responds. If the patient responds, then we escalate to a different treatment until we find one that is safest and most effective for patient. And for us to do that, sometimes it takes quite some time.
Why is it so complex to treat?
The 2 main challenges in treating eczema, one is the disease condition itself. The skin disease itself is difficult to treat because the barrier, while I've put it simply, is a defective barrier, but there are many subcomponents of the barrier that could be deficient in different eczema patients. And how do we restore the barrier? Nobody really knows it yet other than applying moisturizer. The second complexity about eczema has got to be the immunological status, right? We don't know why the immune system gets so hyperactive. It's not all the immune system, it's a very subtype of immune system that causes these allergic reactions. So while we can generally suppress address the immune system as a whole, we can't really target that subtype so that we can tackle the root of the problem and not cause all the other adverse effects. The second challenge is, of course, the patient's preconceived idea of what they think the condition is. Many of them think that it is due to food allergy and they stop a certain type of food and everything will disappear miraculously. They cannot be further away from the truth. The other misconception is the use of topical steroids. A lot of patients feel that topical steroids is really, really bad for health, and they refuse to use topical steroids, and that is really false. Topical steroid used in the right manner can control eczema nicely, giving them a good quality of health.
In search of better treatment options for patients, Professor Teng set up the National Atopic Dermatitis Research Program in 2021.
I'm ashamed to say that being a dermatologist for almost 20 years, the treatment regimen has almost been the same, and patients are still suffering from it. So there's a need to really change the way we treat the patients through research. There are already small groups of researchers that are doing their own research in eczema. I thought it's the right time now to create a National Atopic Dermatitis Research Program to bring together all these facets of research so that we can work together with a single aim to translate our research so that we can improve patient care.
Dr. John Corman is one of the scientists working in the research program. He's collaborating with various research institutes to find clues as to why some cases of eczema are more severe than others.
So this recent study that we did was to study the skin microbes on eczema patients and compare that with healthy control skin. So the microbes that are on the skin form a community called the skin microbiome.
So before we get into the study, can you explain what the skin microbiome is?
The skin microbiome is comprised of bacteria, fungi, and viruses. However, there are some good and bad bacteria, and so it's important to study the skin microbiome and understand more about it so that we can see when the microbes change.
And what did you find out from this study?
So with the National Skin Centre, we collected about 50 subjects within the cohort. Half were eczema and half were healthy. And when we profiled their skin by taking swabs off the skin surface, we were able to look at the different microbes present. And from investigating these different microbes, we could see that the abundance, so the amounts of the different microbes, was quite altered.
How are the results then important when it comes to developing treatments for eczema in the future?
So currently there's lots of really good treatments out there. And the way that they work is that they suppress the inflammation. And these are excellent therapies, and they work for the majority of people. But I think what is seen with the sort of results that we're providing is that there could be other ways to also treat people. And so the microbes play an important part of helping to protect our skin. And so this is another avenue where we can help to intervene to protect the skin. The microbes on the skin can be good or bad, and we know that some of these bad microbes can cause some irritation. So it could be that we look at strategies to replace some of these microbes or provide some nutrients that can help encourage the good microbes to flourish on the skin.
Researchers in this field may still be scratching the surface of this complex skin disorder, but it's reassuring to know that promising developments and treatments are in the pipeline.
Up next, staying on the topic of eczema, an invention that can bring sweet relief to eczema sufferers.
While researchers are looking for better ways to diagnose and treat eczema, an eczema sufferer has come up with a device to help others with the same condition.
Ko Bei-ning wanted to use her skills as an industrial designer to start a meaningful project. And her experience with eczema became her source of inspiration.
So what is this product called and what does it do?
So this product is called Rolo. It is an itch relief device made for eczema patients. So it's not meant to replace things like your medications, but really in that moment of flare-up, you go at it for like 10-15 seconds, relieve your itch, and then move on with your life. So its main component is the rollerball mechanism, where patients can rub over their skin during flare-ups to relieve their itch. So they can go at it as quickly and as hard as they want because it doesn't drag. and thus doesn't tear their skin to worsen their condition. So how this works is that when you roll over your skin, these textures press into it. It actually interrupts itch pathways in your brain to relieve the itch. You can give it a try.
Oh, wow, okay. Like just like this?
Yes.
Like as hard as...
Yeah, as hard as fast you want, Yeah. Yeah, so because during flare-ups, patients are like definitely desperate, so we'll go at it at that kind of rate. So even at that level of usage, it doesn't get caught in your skin to potentially tear it or harm it.
So how did your personal experience with eczema kind of inspire you to create this product?
So I developed eczema when I was 14. So I have like this really clear comparison between life before eczema and life with. I understand that while there's like all the physical and medical symptoms, there's also a lot of emotional and mental stress that comes with it. And I wanted to see how design can provide like an alternative angle to the kind of solutions that we can provide patients with.
As Bei Ning shared with me, many eczema sufferers struggle not to scratch their itchy, inflamed skin. It's a fight they rarely win. But scratching exacerbates the itch, and they end up stuck in a vicious itch-scratch cycle. In order to break that cycle, could she perhaps make the scratching safer?
When I first started designing, I approached it pretty conventionally. I was looking for different textures that you can like rub on your skin. You can give this a try.
What is this plastic that you use?
Yeah, so these things I've hunted from like hardware stores and then finding interesting textures. My goal of that time was to look for something relieving but as gentle as possible. There's some like more absurd...
What is this? Wow!
Just more absurd things. And then seeing how they would use it, how the shape of it affects their behavior. And the dermatologist actually told me that no matter how gentle a texture is, if you rub it hard or long enough, it will still harm your skin to a certain extent. So that was a huge turning point in the design process, and I knew
Bei Ning told me that she started to look into unconventional materials like metal and even beads before she 3D printed various prototypes for user testing.
I gave them 13 different designs and then got them to rate it against 2 scales. The first one being relief, where they benchmarked it against using their fingers. Because if this thing isn't as relieving as their fingers, then there will be lesser motivation to use it. The second scale would be the sense of safety, because feeling safe affects the experience and the level of relief that they feel from this thing. For example, trying out one of these designs, the patient actually found it too harsh for her eczema on her elbow area. So one of her comments was like, this one is quite scary. So with all the feedback, I did map out the takeaways and insights from each, and then the green ones represent the good points, and then the orange ones are like the not so good points. So as you can see, they kind of move towards this middle portion, which is the chosen design.
Aside from user testing, Bei Ning also conducted a carbon paper test. Rolling the device over carbon paper allowed her to see how it presses into the skin.
So this is the results of the test. It's a visualization of what it's really doing on the surface of our skin.
So which texture actually is the most ideal?
As you can see, these are like very clear dots to signify that it's just a downward pressure and there's actually no dragging compared to like when we scratch with our fingers. Like these are actually what we're doing to our skin right now. Something interesting would be like this one. You can try it out.
It doesn't feel like there's much, relief.
Yeah, so you don't feel anything. But then when I did the test, we noticed like the little fading tails. And this actually signifies signs of digging. So in the long run, that may cause some issues onto the skin because it worsens your condition. When you tear your skin, it can get infected. After this, I proceeded to design the holder, which really forms a big portion of the experience. And my users actually, they mentioned how they would feel really comfortable using this in public because it's something that fits into the palm of their hand. Even if they're using it on the train, for example, it's rather concealed, which is something I would really want to pay attention to in the design process to make this a lot more suitable to coexist with our everyday life.
After months of research, trials and tests later, Rolo is finally ready. In 2022, it was named as one of 2 runner-ups at the Singapore James Dyson Award.
So if you wanted to get one of these Rolos right now, is it already available for sale?
The project right now is under incubation at the Design Incubation Center in NUS. And we're actually looking at a Kickstarter campaign launch that will be happening mid this year.
Rolo might not be a cure for eczema, but until there is a cure, this little device has the potential to provide much-needed relief to a lot of sufferers. And for the sake of my friends with eczema, I really hope that this will hit the market soon.
Up next, I find out, when it comes to sunscreen, is the higher the SPF, the better the protection?
I'm quite good at making sure I wear sunscreen every day to protect my skin from the sun. But I know not many people here in Singapore do that, and sometimes I get a little lazy too. But is it really that important, even on rainy days? And with so many different sunscreens and different SPFs, how do I even know if I'm using the right one? Let's ask the expert.
Dermatologist Dr. Angeline Yong debunks skincare myths online, using creative ways to share skincare tips and information.
Firstly, why is it so important to protect our skin from the sun?
I think it's really important to protect our skin against the sun because the sun is the cause of a lot of issues such as photoaging, photo damage, and even the root of the development of skin cancers. It is important to protect the skin so that we keep our skin bright with less dullness and pigmentation issues, and we also prevent sort of early skin malignancies from developing. So overall, to keep the skin healthy and happy, it is important that UV radiation is kept as minimal as possible.
And how do sunscreens actually help us do that?
Sun protection acts as a filter to the external environment. If there's more cloud cover, there might be less ultraviolet radiation that reaches our level. However, if there's less cloud cover in a sunny environment or in high altitude, you will get a lot more ultraviolet radiation actually affecting the skin. So what sunscreen does is basically to form a film to reflect or to absorb and deflect some of these damage that ultraviolet rays can cause on our skin.
Oh, I see. And the thing is, when I go into a store, there's so many different kinds of sunscreen, different levels of SPF. How do you even choose?
So SPF really is a measure of how good our skin is protected by the substance or the sunscreen from UVB radiation. So when we look at it, we always look at common factors like SPF 30, sometimes that can be 40, 50, and even 100. So how do we arrive at that value? So normally in a lab, when you do testing for sunscreen, you're looking at the difference in time it takes for the area of skin that is protected by sunscreen to go through redness, as opposed to how long it takes for unprotected similar skin to go through redness as well.
Simply put, the SPF number tells you how much longer you can stay out in the sun with the sunscreen on compared to when you are unprotected. So if it takes 5 minutes for your skin to start reddening without sun protection, a sunscreen with SPF 30 should allow you 5 times 30 minutes. That is 150 minutes before you burn.
So the higher the SPF number, typically, of course, the better the protection is. But there is a point where the curve plateaus off. So the incremental value of going from SPF 50 to 100 may only give you an extra 1% of coverage. So effectively, it works out to basically between 98 to 99%, and that 1% difference may be rather marginal.
Okay, and then
That was rather confusing. But Dr. Yong explained that SPF can be converted to a percentage of protection. So SPF 50 means that 1/50th of the UV rays reaches the skin. 1 divided by 50 is 0.02 or 2%. 2% of UV rays reaching the skin means that SPF 50 can block 98% of the UV radiation. Using the same calculation, I could see why SPF 100 would then only block 99% of UV radiation.
I typically like to look for sunscreen between 40 to 50. SPF 30 is still acceptable to me if the person using it is largely not outdoors. If you're going from home to car to transport, and then maybe just going out for a meal and then back to the office again. But if you have pigmentation issues like melasma, for example, which is very UV sensitive, then I would suggest that at least an SPF 50, because I think it's a good trade-off between having a good enough protection and then also being acceptable in terms of texture as well. Very often that people have a false sense of security that they spray on and lather on SPF 80 to 100, they're done. If you're out hiking or you're out by the pool and you're frequently sweating or perspiring, and it's also an environment that's humid as well, sunscreen does get washed off. So it is more important to be diligent and to reapply SPF every 2 to 3 hours rather than to just go for the highest number possible and apply it at once.
However, Dr. Yong shared that SPF only indicates protection against UVB. UVB is one of the 2 UV rays that affects our skin. The other is UVA. An unprotected exposure to UVA is also harmful to our skin.
While UVB is a major concern because UVB is what causes like DNA damage and subsequent even skin cancer formation, UVA also does cause issues such as photoaging. So it's important to look at the UVA factor, and that's usually measured with a plus value. So it can be UVA plus, plus plus, or plus plus plus. Obviously, the higher the number of pluses, the better the coverage as well. So it's good to get a broad spectrum sunscreen that has both UVA and UVB cover.
So how do we actually then know if our sunscreen is effective, if it's working?
It's quite tricky. So sometimes you only know when you come back. You start to feel like maybe you have some issues such as redness, like a photo burn effect on the skin. You get tan lines and you get browning effect. And then you can see a sharp, like sort of tan line developing over the face or over the sort of the swimming costume that you wear. You kind of know that your sun coverage hasn't been fantastic. But during the midst of that day itself of the activity, you can't quite feel whether your sun protection is adequate. You can only try your best to make sure that you reapply, see any spots that are missing, and then sort of get somebody else to apply it over the back for you.
So what other tips do you have for protecting our skin against the sun?
Other main thing you should look at is whether it's a physical or chemical sunscreen. So if we're talking about a mineral sunscreen, typically it contains zinc or titanium oxide, and it's usually useful in patients with allergenic skin type. So if you have a young child, you typically will want to keep them on the physical sunscreen for safety reasons. If the skin also has an issue with eczema, so it's an adult with facial eczema or dermatitis, then it is usually the safer approach to utilize a pure physical sunscreen. On the other hand, when you talk about chemical-based sunscreen, there's a whole host of different chemical compounds that are put into a blend to really sort of absorb and deflect UV radiation. Now, these chemical sunscreens are usually not a problem in the average patient, but can be a problem if somebody has sensitive skin type. The benefits of chemical sunscreen are that it is typically lighter weight. So most people find that it's easier to apply, especially in acne-prone skin that tends to congest. It is maybe less sticky, less greasy as well.
After speaking to Dr. Yong, I'm definitely going to be more diligent about applying sunscreen and to reapply it more often. It's not just about skin cancer, but who needs sun-damaged skin, right?